Welcome to the Big Success Podcast, cutting-edge conversations on business and personal success, as well as how to level up. Here's your host, #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars.
This week is packed with literally idea after idea after idea. Jeff just keeps blurting out stuff that is brilliant. Serial entrepreneur, built many companies, litigation support company built and sold, all those sorts of things that he's done. His company, 12 Mavens, works with CEOs and helps CEOs become amazing out in what they do. So when you think about what he's achieved, and then in today's session, when we talk about how to lead leaders, when we talk about how to build a great lead generation and great conversion rate systems, and even how to build a business for sale, I think some of his takes on that are phenomenal. And yeah, let's just dive right in. Jeff Davis, invitation-only company, CEOs only, 12 Mavens. He coaches them. He helps them succeed. And today he's going to help us succeed on the podcast. So, Jeff Davis, welcome to the Big Success Podcast. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Excited to be here.
But I want to start with the question that I've heard you talk about before, but how do you define success? What's your definition, or what is success to you?
Yeah, to me, success is well-rounded success. If somebody has great revenue or they're making a great income, but they're out of shape, they're not healthy, they're depressed, they're burnt out, they're not enjoying life, to me, that's not success. Maybe they're winning with the revenue, maybe they're winning with the income. But it's not, to me, my definition, not success. It's more of a full spectrum success.
Has that always been your definition, or is that something you had to learn and grow into over time?
No, I think when I was in my early 30s, I was the classic warrior mode, trying to prove myself to my parents, prove myself to my friends, and working every night, every weekend. Wearing a fancy suit and tie and trying to look successful, trying to get things that gave the appearance of being successful, and push the gas as hard as you could push that pedal through the floor, at all costs. And yeah, I mean, I started to get to a point where I was burning out and tired out and starting to have some health issues.
How did you shift? What was it that made you shift from that model of success to your current model?
For me personally, it was the moment that I became a father, when we had our baby, who will be graduating high school in a year now, for context.
Yeah.
But when the moment I became a father, then it didn't feel cool to work until 3 a.m. anymore. I wanted to be a great dad, like that full spectrum of success. Being a great dad became, one of the highest things, and so that I became fanatical, just like I became fanatical about lead generation, sales conversions, and all those things. I became fanatical about being a great dad.
So let's go back in your life then. Where did you choose success? At what age? Do you remember? Was it a particular thing, a particular time where you chose, hey, I'm going to be successful in life?
Yeah, I feel like I was a little bit of a late bloomer in that in college, I was still, hanging out, pushing around on a skateboard, going out with friends at night. Even in grad school, I was still, usually you're kind of clicking in grad school and you're a little bit more straight-laced and focused, but I was still enjoying myself, like a guy in his 20s. But I think it was the point where I got a job right out of grad school and was just learning the industry that I wanted to start my own company in. And after a couple of years, for me, when I got to a point where I could do this, I got enough, it's time, let's go. For me, I put myself through every kind of training, education, boot camp. I walked in to a library. This is back in the day. I go into a library and go to the audio cassettes, blow the smoke, the dust off the cassette boxes with the cheesy music at the beginning. You're listening to, but everything. I was obsessed. I would get everything I could consume. and really just tried to brainwash myself in a positive way. I mean,
Yeah.
everything from like tapes on negotiation, on sales, on marketing, on mindset. I probably drove around listening to Napoleon Hill speak. That tape, I almost burned through it. Played it so many times.
So do you think it was a decision to go into business, or was it just what triggered that success choice?
Oh, well, there were little things planted throughout my life. So I used to love surfing when I was a teenager, and I used to like to surf at this one place where there are these beautiful mansions on the ocean, and I'd be sitting out there on my board looking out at these homes and thinking, I want that. I want to live somewhere like that. And I was lucky enough to go to two very different high schools. One was a public school that was for the arts. It was great for being, creative and that sort of thing. But I also went to a fancy private school, and there were things that were good about both and things that were bad about both.
Yeah.
And I think that contrast of some of the struggles, some of the limitations of what you could have at one school, and some of the things that at the other school that you were able to do, and experiencing both of those. And I was kind of, probably in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah. So what's your formula then, or how does success happen in your mind?
It happens in a number of ways. And you made me think of a time I was asked to speak to this big room of people, young, up and coming, aspirational entrepreneurs. And I grabbed the microphone and I looked around the room and I said, you guys want to know the secret to the one thing that you do this and everything starts clicking like magic? I said, can we lock the door in the back? I was like, is there anybody coming? And everybody's kind of, getting their pens out and getting all excited. And I said, here's the secret, is that there is no one thing. It's a lot of things. It's hard work. It's believing in yourself. It's a bunch of different skill sets that you have to really work at. It's resilience. It's, and perseverance. It's not just one thing. Because I know some really smart people. I know some really successful people, and I've yet to meet anyone who hasn't had a million explosions blow up in their face along the way.
Yeah. So let's talk about that then. How does failure teach success?
Failure teaches success every time if you take the time to learn from it. Usually, most people get mad, they curse it. They hate it. They're not do that again. They point out everybody else's fault for that thing happening versus really assessing, what do I learn from this? What could I apply next time? How could I have done that better? And really being a student of it. What's the expression? Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And if you just look at it that way, and when you have an employee do something that was a big expensive mistake that you realize, all right, great, I just invested in a whole course on how not to onboard a salesperson, or just looking at what could I take from it, what could I learn from it. And that's one of the reasons why I love being in a CEO roundtable group, is because you also get to learn from all these other people's costly mistakes. You hear them talk, oh, we tried to do, and this happened, and you're picking up little clues. You're filling in the dots with more knowledge from other people's mistakes too.
So let's think about that for a moment. Learning from your own mistakes, learning from other people's mistakes. Failure teaches, it gives us a lesson every single time. What's the biggest lesson you've taken from one of your so-called failures?
Woo! The biggest lesson. I mean, I think it's personal for each person. There are as many lessons as there are entrepreneurs going after it, times 1,000. Some of my own personal lessons that I've learned was not being too nice, not being too trusting. And when I say not being too nice, you get into trouble sometimes when you're you know, you don't want to ruffle feathers and hold people accountable and say the things that you should have already said and that kind of thing. I would say not pushing your strengths too far, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because your biggest weaknesses usually are the result of you pushing your strengths a little too far.
Yeah.
And-
That
and
double-edged
being-
sword type thing is very important.
Yeah, being conscious of that and having leveling the optimism with some practicality.
Absolutely. We're going to be back on the Big Success Podcast. You got Jeff Davis here. We're going to talk about leading leaders. We're going to talk about building a business for sale. We're going to do a whole bunch of this. We'll be right back on the Big Success Podcast.
Business empires are where most people create the vast majority of their initial income and wealth. Through Brad Sugars' Entrepreneurs event, you will learn how to turn your companies into valuable and sellable assets. Visit bradsugars.com to attend this program as a standalone or as part of Brad Sugars' Entrepreneurial University.
And we're back on the Big Success Podcast. Jeff Davis from 12 Mavens is going to talk to us about how do you lead leaders?
Yeah, and when I think about what I do, is I lead meetings with CEOs that are running multi-million-dollar companies all the time. And so you have these visionaries, sometimes with ADD and you know, looking around for opportunities and moving fast and inability to sit still. And how do you lead a leader themselves? And to me, it's more impactful to earn their respect, more so for them to love you. You want them to like you a lot, but when people are pushing and testing and kind of seeing what they can get away with, when they see you as their leader, not allowing that to happen, whether they like it or don't like it, they know that they're following a good leader.
So how then do you bring out the best in people?
Yeah, I think you bring out the best in people by kind of customizing your approach to that particular person. If you try to do a cookie cutter approach to all these different people, it'll work with this person and that person maybe, but it won't really have an effect on this person. So I think it helps to really get an understanding of what motivates them, what's driving them. I've seen it, you know, where a CEO will put in some kind of a bonus incentive and then be surprised that it didn't really move the needle, but because maybe these people aren't really money motivated.
Yeah.
So I think it's customizing the approach to each individual leader in a way that you think will be the most effective for that leader.
Yeah. So let's go back a ways. You're a serial entrepreneur, started multiple companies. How do we succeed at starting a company? We'll get to selling it in a little while, but how do you succeed at starting a business?
At starting a business, I always like to compare it to that scene in Braveheart where there's that big field, they're all lined up, and then you see on the two sides, they're just running towards each other. I tell entrepreneurs, that's kind of what year one feels like. It's a bloody war that you have to be prepared for. And that's why I think entrepreneurs are modern day gladiators, because the statistics are that 96 out of every 100 startups will not celebrate a 10-year anniversary. So if you imagine 100 warriors lined up at the field of battle, looking at each other, pulling out their swords, about to charge, knowing all of them are going to die except for a few survivors, and you say, let's go, let's do it.
So how do we succeed at that then? If we know we're going into battle, how do we succeed at it?
Well, I think part of it is knowing what you're up for and being willing to fight for it. And the first year of a startup, maybe, you know, a couple of years into it, is, I don't know what the rule is, Brad, on bad words. Keep it clean.
We can bleep them if we need to.
Well, I'll say you have to eat a lot of poop sandwiches. and so the thing that the startup, you have to love it and be so passionate about it and obsessed with it that it's worth eating all of these poop sandwiches, because If it's just an idea and you just kind of like, yeah, it seems like it would make sense and maybe it would make money, but you really don't care that much. After a while of eating those, you start to lose that drive. You start to lose that push to fight through all those obstacles. I mean, that's a part of it. I mean, so much of it, I think the separation of a large portion of startups making it is just the founder had that toughness, that resilience, and that work ethic, because for sure that work ethic is going to be one of the most important elements of it. And I would say also with the mindset of the startup is having this sense of inevitability. It's not something you hope is going to happen. It's not something that would be nice if it's going to happen. It's something that it's definitely happening. We are going to find it. And when we get to, 30,000 users, we're at that point going to, does that answer your question?
Perfect answer. So you're also massively passionate about lead generation and converting the sale. How do you succeed at lead generation?
Yeah, it is such a moving target already in marketing. When you have something that works, oh my God, it's working. We're getting this is happening. This is going here. Oh, perfect. The plan is working. It's a matter of time before more people will use it, and then it gets diluted. So, so you've had that happen with multiple lead gen techniques over the last few years. Then you layer that with a pandemic, you layer that with new technology. I mean, the world of lead generation and marketing is getting turned on its head like right now. Forget the pandemic, forget inflation, forget a recession. AI is changing all the rules right now. It's happening. Go on Chat GPT and ask it about your company's name and see if anything comes up, because it will for some of your competitors. You could have AI write blog entries. You could have I don't want to get too down, one particular area, but it's testing, it's measuring, and then optimizing. And when something starts to work, really go after it. I used to hear the expression growth hacking, and thought like, growth hacking, the hack is hard work. Until I actually learned about growth hacking, and it's really what it's I don't like that term they gave it, but really it's blending a data scientist with a marketer, with a salesperson, with it's almost more scientific than it is artistic.
So let's go to that salesperson then. How do we succeed at converting those leads into actual sales?
Yeah, I think the more you can have a winning, replicable process, the better chance you have of those conversions. So, for example, if you say something that works a lot of the time, it should be transcribed, it should be a script, and it should be worked on, drilled on, practiced, perfected. And same with like the rebuttals to the most common objections. It should be scripted. They should be, we don't have time. The person should know, like almost waiting for it. Like you got your bat out and you're almost hoping somebody tells you they don't have time, or they already have somebody that they use, or that sounds expensive, but you like those things. It's not freestyle. It's not a freestyle rap. It's scripted out. It's practiced and rehearsed like a symphony. And then the part of it that really was where the rubber hits the road is holding the team accountable to actually doing it, because very few salespeople like all of this, between the lines type of stuff, administrative details and following this and this. I remember telling a salesperson, I've had 17 people try to freestyle and improve on this script, and they're 0-17. And then that person became, 18, thinking that they could do it better than that script. And so it gets to where like recording those conversations, not just trusting that the calls are going how you think they are. I'd be willing to bet anybody listening to this, if you listened to all of your salespeople's sales calls, you probably won't want to grab a beer at the end of that day.
So let's go backwards. 10, 20 years ago, it was 20% marketing, 80% sales to get a conversion. These days, it's sort of flipped on its head. How do you see that changing the way we build businesses?
It's changing so fast that I'm cautious to even answer that one, because everything is changing so fast right now that, literally a year from now, I could be embarrassed about what this answer is. I can't even imagine how difficult it would be to write a book on this topic, because by the time the publisher's done printing it, it's like, this thing's a factor now. There are a lot of tools that can automate a lot of things. You could be robotic with so many parts of that lead generation into the sales conversation and the follow-up, where you could automate. You could have the perfect, post-conversation email, automated, so you're not relying as much on a salesperson's remembering to do this or having the time to do this. And I think the more that you can use marketing and marketing automation, sales conversions, and follow-up automation, and tools that are, coming out all the time, I think the less and less of the salesperson you need, which could be nice if you can just have salespeople just closing and converting, and almost everything else is taken off their plate. That's great. Depends on what the product or the service is, whether if you can do the whole thing from beginning to end without a human, then more power to you.
We'll be back in just a moment on the Big Success Podcast. We're going to be talking to Jeff Davis about how to sell a business and how to scale it up.
Jeff Davis is an award-winning author, professional speaker, and leadership expert. With over 20 years of experience, Jeff has coached executives and teams from various industries to develop their leadership skills and achieve their goals. To learn more about Jeff Davis, please visit his website today.
And we're back with the Jeff Davis. When you think about Jeff building as a serial entrepreneur, building businesses, you build them for sale. If you look at your trial prep company, many companies you've advised, what are the keys to building something that is saleable?
Yeah, to build a saleable business, it takes real specific intentional actions. I always feel bad for the person that decides they're ready to sell the business. And I think, oh man, too bad you didn't start that plan 3 to 5 years ago, because I think you need to map out a detailed plan for how you can get your business to run with or without you. To the degree that you are involved in the business is the degree that the valuation will go down. I remember my mentor, who's a Harvard MBA, explained it to me at a lunch one time. And he said, back in those days, a long time ago, he said, "You're too entrenched in your business. You're going to get the key man discount." And I said, "What's that?" And he explained it. And I said, "Well, if I can get my business to run with or without me, how much more could I sell it for?" And he said, "Probably about 40%. And I almost spit my water in his face. You don't need much more motivation. But so I got to work on mapping out a detailed plan, like over the years, to transition myself out of the business. So I wasn't, such a bottleneck.
Yeah.
Which then the next step of that is building out a leadership team. Like we talked about, how do you lead leaders, and developing leaders and a support team that can start taking things off your plate little by little, more and more, to the point where you're almost trying to make yourself obsolete, which then goes into the next thing, which is mastering delegation. It's an art and it's a science. And I actually I trained myself on the skill of delegating. And I remember at the end of the day going, darn, it's all my fault. and I wanted it to be everybody else's fault. But I was like, did I have them repeat it back to me? When I gave them that thing that I thought would take about an hour, and a week later, they still hadn't done it. Did I tell them I need this by tomorrow at 2:30? No. Did I, all these different little nuances that can make you a more effective delegator, master delegation. Another thing is systematizing your business. Brad, you've been successful because you built a replicable model that people can leverage and and build a business, because the playbook is there, and that's the beauty of a franchise. But even if you don't want to ever sell your business, you should be fanatical about systematizing everything that you do, and processes, video capture, on your screen, checklists, because when you have all those processes documented and other people could come in and do it, then there's no end. You just have to imagine, on Monday, 100 different people are all going to pay you for a franchise, and what would they expect to get, and then have that for yourself, for your business. Another thing is actually making the time to learn how. Like, so you're putting this out into the world, which helps a lot of people, impacts a lot of people that could make a little tweak in how they're doing something, and by watching this, you're taking the time to learn some of this stuff. But so many people, they're so busy making what they make, selling what they sell, that they just keep going head down, and they're not taking time to learn these kinds of things that we're talking about. Another thing is getting over your guilt, ego, limiting beliefs, which you might feel like you have to be first one in, last one out, which is great and respectable as a leader, but at the same time, as far as sellability of your business, it's not great. And then doing things like this, leveraging hindsight. I mean, there are a lot of factors we could go into, recurring revenue and all these value drivers, but that's off the some of the things that make a more sellable business.
One of the big things you do at 12 Mavens is you help CEOs scale. What is the difference between someone who, their business grows a little bit versus those who scale and grow massive?
So I love this topic, Brad, because I have had the unique privilege of picking the brains of highly successful entrepreneurs and CEOs for years. Dozens and dozens of Inc. 500 CEOs, people running and scaling the fastest growing companies in the world. So not just what I did to scale, but I have, great friends that have built businesses I have a friend that literally built a business from 3 people to turning just about at $1 billion in annual revenue right now.
Now, when we say friends, most of these are clients at 12 Mavens, and that's how you built the friendships with a lot of these people.
Yeah. I mean, you're like a family when you brainstorm together every month, and you hold each other accountable, and you've been help each other through the rough patch. You do become friends. But for sure, I've learned from members of the groups that have made the Inc. 500 and best places to work, been named ultimate CEOs of their area, their areas where they live. And I've asked this question countless times. One thing that's come up a lot of times is that ethic of hard work that we talked about, is that all-in mentality. Some of the other things we talked about being, they're nice, but they're not pleasers. They obsess over the vision, and they don't get too bogged down with in the weeds type of activities. They're focusing on the things that move the needle. They're optimistic, but they're not too optimistic. They're also mitigating the risks. They're being practical. And if you think about the biggest financial mistakes that you've ever made, it probably was because you were too optimistic about that thing. They know their formulas. They know their metrics. They're very well aware of what numbers need to happen and what these percentages are and where they're at daily, weekly, monthly.
What then, Jeff, sets them apart? What's the difference between the CEO that sets $1 million goal and the CEO that sets $1 billion goal? What's the difference in those two people?
I think you said it in the question. One of them is setting $1 million goal. The other one has a mentality of $1 billion goal. I mean, the most successful people think in massive scale. And for you watching this or listening to this right now, what's your 3-year goal right now? Forget about at the end of this conversation, but what's your 3-year goal right now? Okay, the most successful people, they would add a 0 to that, if not several zeros. And then it becomes a matter of believing it and then reverse engineering. All right, how am I going to get there? And it goes back to a lot of the things that we've talked about, that quest for knowledge, the finding ways to connect the dots faster, because if you knew exactly how to build a $12 billion business, you could be a $12 billion business right now, but there are things that you have to figure out. But they have that belief, and they set the bar that much higher, and then they're very realistic about, all right, what do we need to do it? Where most people, like you said, they just do what they think they could probably do, and then not have to feel like a failure if they don't get it.
All right, let's dive into the quick fire round. Short answers, short questions. How do you succeed at goal setting?
Number one, do it. Number two, make it. I mean, there's the SMART, rule as far as goal setting. But I think if you don't even look at it as a goal, and it's something that's a must, it's not a should do. There's the Tony Robbins expression, when you have a lot of shoulds, all you do is should all over yourself. It's a must. And so being conscious of setting these goals as they're critically important to do it, checking them regularly. I can't tell you how many times people will set their annual goals, put it away somewhere, and within a few weeks, forget a few months, a few weeks, they couldn't even tell you where it's at. So whatever you can do to stay top of mind with those goals, and then break them into teeny, tiny, achievable steps.
Last question of the day. What's the best quote you ever had on success, or the best advice you ever got from someone about how to succeed?
Ooh, that is so hard, because I am, like a lot of entrepreneurs, a quote person. I've got PDFs with
What's
pages
number one
and
then?
pages.
What's number one?
Oh my God. I don't know if I could spit out. I didn't have to think about it. I have to shop through my hundreds of favorite quotes. I've got several. Privileges and obligations must always be in balance. I like that one. When things are going great.
Privileges and obligations must always be in balance. I like that. I like it a lot. This is the Big Success Podcast. You've been listening to Jeff Davis and me, Brad Sugars. Make sure you check out all of Jeff's stuff. Check out 12 Mavens, his Plan the Attack workshops. Make sure you come back next week and subscribe to the Big Success Podcast. And that's the Big Success Podcast for today. Hopefully you took a lot of notes. Hopefully you learned a bunch. And hopefully you're going to take action on it. BS, Brad Sugars, Big Success, take action. Check all the show notes for all of the links. So make sure that you have links to every single thing that every speaker has in our show notes. Check them now. Click the links. Take advantage of it. And I'll speak to you again next time on the Big Success Podcast.
You've been listening to the Big Success Podcast with the #1 business coach in the world, Brad Sugars. To learn more about how to achieve business and personal success, as well as how to level up or listen to past episodes, visit www.bradsugars.com.